Hello my friends, what is up guys? It's Kat here. Thank you so much for coming back and joining me. Andor season 1 finale came out during the holiday week, and unfortunately I was traveling. I didn't have any of my setup with me, of course, for the holidays, so I didn't really actually get to do a review of the finale itself, episode 12, and I figured instead of just doing a review on that singular episode, I wanted to talk more about the series as a whole and specifically focus on the impact that it has seemingly had within the Star Wars fandom. The state of the fandom, which is something that I don't really discuss much in my videos. I talk about it more during live streams, I guess, but I feel like when it comes to the impact that Andor specifically has had, it's worth mentioning. Now, of course, every time I talk about the fandom, this is coming from the place of somebody who is still on Twitter guilty. So take that with a grain of salt, because if you don't have social media, if you don't have Twitter especially, or Reddit, if people talk about Star Wars on Reddit or whatnot, if you are not a member of any sort of forum where people discuss Star Wars, good for you, because it can be a lawless place. But that's where most of my intel, or whatever, most of my observations come from. So just take that with a grain of salt. Disclaimer up front. So for now, I will just share my thoughts on Season 1 here. I don't think I need to necessarily go into too much detail because, as I have repeatedly said throughout my reactions and then my later reviews of the episodes, this show has truly exceeded every expectation that I had, and my expectations were up here. Even without, they didn't really even give us much going into it, kind of similar to all Star Wars projects. We didn't really have much idea surrounding the plot, who these new characters were going to be. We just knew it was going to be a lot of fresh faces, a fresh storyline, and a pretty much untouched timeline within Star Wars, the Star Wars canon, with the exception of, I guess, like animated shows like Rebels. But in terms of live action and the state of the Empire right now and the political tension and the rise of the rebellion, that was previously uncharted territory. So we knew going in that they had a lot of wiggle room to work with to tell what has proven to be a very expansive story that does span beyond just Cassian himself, which has been one of my favorite parts of this show. And I say this as someone who, back when they first announced that Andor was getting his own show, I was among the crowd of people who was like a little flabbergasted by that. Like, at that time, it was not something that I was necessarily even hyped for, because Kenobi, like my mind was just not. So that's the place where I started, and then slowly as we got a little bit more regarding the scale of this production, my expectations truly skyrocketed, especially knowing that they were going to be operating on what they said was a feature film quality production, and that alone was enough to pique my interest and be like, sure, we haven't gotten a Star Wars like film on the big screen, but perhaps we don't even need to, as we're segueing into this time now where streaming and shows can operate on this level. It's like I don't even need to be in the theater because this feels like movie quality. So my expectations were freaking in a galaxy far away. They were nowhere to be found because that's how high they were. And even still, this show freaking blew it out of the water in every single regard. The production, the sets, shooting on location, the performances from the cast, the freaking dialogue, the script, the screenwriting, the emphasis on building the stakes, the pacing, the fact that it was so freaking fleshed out, and we started not knowing any of these people on Ferrix or what even Ferrix was, and got to a point where I'm freaking crying during the finale, during Marva's final monologue. They're like, literally, what? And this is what I have been wanting from Star Wars. New faces, new problems, and as much as I want to get like out of this timeline that we are familiar with, I'll take whatever I can get that's fresh. And that is what I loved about this show. It was such an ensemble piece, and Diego Luna said it himself before the show even came out, like, yes, ignore the title because this is about so much more than just Cassian, but he was obviously an incredible protagonist amongst many other key players. Luthen, Mon freaking Mothma, who was truly one of like the most exceptional parts of this show. I hope Genevieve knows how freaking glorious she is in every sense of the word, because she was freaking stellar and stole every literal scene that she was in. Freaking Andy Serkis, like just the surprises at every corner of this show. And even characters like Nemec, who only survived for one arc, had huge impact, and I was heartbroken after just meeting them 2 episodes ago. This show was so well-rounded, and the attention to detail and just for every little thing being fleshed out to the point where the stakes and my investment were just so heightened. I understand that when it comes to the pacing of this show, there was certainly a lot of discourse surrounding how people responded to that, and I know it had the biggest effect on whether people were able to get invested in the show or not from the beginning. And I will say, yes, the payoff for episodes, 3 episodes, like the eye on Aldani, and then the eventual prison break, like No Way Out, those were massive finale, like season finale level episodes in terms of the stakes and the action, and just that I was on the edge of my seat, literally shaking my bones. Every part of my skeletal system was quivering. While yes, like I can sit here and say the payoff was so huge and so worth the wait that it took to get to those pivotal high points, the peaks, the climaxes of the show, I do understand that you have to be patient getting there, and there were even times where I wasn't patient myself. Like I just wanted the episode, like I don't know, I feel like there's a balance that could have been found in there, and I feel like that's where the show lost a lot of people, because at least for Star Wars fans, like we're not really used to that structure for a series. We're used to the kind of mini-series or an 8-episode season, you know, like we get with Mando, and I believe Book of Boba Fett was only 7. That's kind of the structure that we have been raised on from Disney Plus, and so to have something so fleshed out over the span of 12 episodes, which I dig it, and I hope they continue to do like going forward. I feel like that is the sweet spot. A lot of this show I feel like boiled down to preference. Some people don't like that slow burn, and it's like totally fine, but I do think that the showrunners took that risk, and it paid off in my eyes, because when you allow the storyline to be so fleshed out and you take the time to pay attention to the detail and show the minutia of every little side plot going on, to show all of these different stories and how they connect, I'm gonna be invested, and I'm gonna be watching the calendar and just counting down the days until we can get the next episode. When you build the tension that high and the stakes are through the roof, it made me care. It made me care about all of these new faces in the show. That is one of the most amazing parts of this show. The only people that we knew realistically going in were Cassian, Mon Mothma, and Saw Gerrera. I might be forgetting a few others, but other than those 3, everyone was new. Oh, Milshi. Everybody was new, and by the end of the show, not even by the end, even by freaking episode like 3, I cared about all of them, and I had never heard of them before. To me, that's successful, because so much of Star Wars rides on how we project on these characters, how we relate to them, how we see ourselves in them. Again, I might be biased because I have been wanting to see new faces in Star Wars, and I know that for other people it can be harder to get connected and invested in a show when there aren't the familiar players, you know, and I don't judge anybody for their preferences. That's the crux of what I want to get into when it comes to the impact that this show has had on the fandom, because not that it's been polarizing, but we are kind of seeing some extremes with this show that I feel like we haven't seen as consistently with the other live action Star Wars shows. I feel like they are pretty unanimous. I don't feel like it's as opposite sides of the spectrum as Andor has been, and it makes me excited but also concerned, because I, for example, loved this show. The showrunners said it themselves. They took a risk. This was different in every way, shape, and form, different from everything that we've known about live action Star Wars so far, in terms of the tone, pace, everything I just explained. It broke out of the mold. It's something new, and I really appreciated that and want to see them continue taking these types of risks, continue playing around with different moods and tones of these shows, because the Star Wars universe is huge and so expansive, and this show I feel like did so much to contribute to the world building. But I say that recognizing that some people felt the complete opposite way about this show, and that's what I think has been so interesting, because we have some people in the fandom saying like, yes, this is the best Star Wars that they've seen, like some of the peak Star Wars content. In some respects, I would agree with that. I would say, as it stands, this is my favorite live action show that we've gotten so far. But on the other side of the spectrum, there are people who genuinely didn't like the show and couldn't get into it. And there is absolutely nothing wrong with that. I just want to say that. But that has seemingly been the crux of what a lot of the unfriendly discourse has been surrounding the show. You know, I've seen comments saying, if you don't like Andor, then you're not an adult. Oh, you can't handle mature Star Wars, which freaking, I hate that. Like, we can't just let people have their own opinions in this fandom. Now, I understand that we should hold people accountable if they're being, like, overtly toxic and saying hurtful or negative, like, horrific things. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Now that I'm talking about this, I feel like I don't even want to dive into it because I don't want it to sound like I'm not grateful to be a part of this fandom. This is an amazing fandom, but there's nobody keeping us in check. I feel like we have to find a way going forward to navigate just being more accepting of each other and each other's opinions, because this is all my own opinion, and everyone probably has their own experience within this fandom, but mine, I've seen people just can't accept others not liking a show or liking a movie. Like, we just can't, like, let each other be. Especially with this show, I've seen a lot of people just dealing with absolutes within this fandom, for lack of a better term. You know, it's like, if you don't like Andor, you can't appreciate good TV, or you're wrong if you like Andor, or I don't know. I guess I'm just touching on this because I feel like this is so not sustainable, the way that the fandom interacts. Whenever we have disagreements, it's always either you're right and I'm wrong, or some sort of sense of hierarchy, and it always comes down to, you're not a real Star Wars fan if you liked this. Gatekeeping, and, you know, I guess I say this because look at, for example, you know, all of the live action shows we've already gotten so far, 4, with many more in the pipeline, and I had sincerely hoped that when Star Wars achieved what I think it's on track now with, you know, the similar state that Marvel is in, just consistent content, you know, take what you like, leave what you don't. You don't have to like everything. You know, people have their favorites, people have their preferences. You can pick your favorite content and then carry on with your day, and nobody's worse for the wear. With all of these new shows where it would just get to a point where maybe the division would subside and people wouldn't be coming for each other as much, and it's happening now on both sides of the fandom, this sense of hierarchy that it's like, if you don't like this, then you're bad, or like, that's not verbatim, but that's the general sense that has especially been, you know, on recent Star Wars Twitter, and it's just like, we can't just let people be. And again, I have to clarify, I'm not saying we should let the toxicity go unchecked. We're not going to advance as a fandom if we let that happen. I guess I'm fixated on this so much because, if anything, the release of so much new content has had somewhat of a reverse effect than what I had initially hoped it would, and instead people view Star Wars now through this lens of, we have to compare the newest project to the latest one, and if your opinion differs from mine, well then you're not right, and I'm a bigger Star Wars fan than you. You know, I've seen this especially with people comparing Andor with Kenobi or any other show. Like, yes, Andor, in my opinion, is amazing, but that doesn't negate how I feel about the other shows, and it doesn't immediately diminish the high points of the other shows. They're all different. They're all different children. Everything is under an umbrella, and that's only going to keep growing as new shows and everything is in the pipeline. Like, we're just only gonna get more and more content. Like, and I don't think it's sustainable to continue to pit the shows against each other because everybody has different favorites. I don't know where I'm going with this. For example, the discourse surrounding Andor versus Kenobi, they're two different pieces of two different pies. Like, they are not even, we shouldn't even be looking necessarily to compare them. Things can coexist. That doesn't necessarily have to mean that we need to pit them against one another. There's just a hierarchy in this fandom, I feel like, and it almost feels like a competition as to who's the most dedicated, who's the real fan, who's the biggest fan, based on what your preferences are. I feel like we haven't reached a point yet where we can accept that the content is all going to be different, and I think we should be welcoming that as we are entering a literal new era in which streaming is dominating, and we're getting all of these new shows and series and mini-series of everything under the sun. I think we should embrace different shows, different vibes, different tones, different moods. The last thing I would want is for Star Wars to be consistent necessarily. But at the same time, I understand that people in this fandom have completely differing views from mine. There's freaking... Did we just surpass like 8 billion people in the global population? You're not gonna please everyone. And I feel like we've just have yet to reach a place where people can accept that and let each other move on and live their lives in peace. I feel like I wanted to touch on this, and I feel like I have a responsibility as a content creator who tries so hard to create a positive corner of YouTube here, at least on this channel. I'm not doing myself or any of us a service by not trying to do my part in generating some sense of positivity and acceptance of one another. Not everything is going to be for everyone. Not every new Star Wars show is going to appeal to every single one of us. We need to acknowledge that that's okay, and I don't think we should ever judge someone. We're certainly not gonna get anywhere if we continue to gatekeep this fandom from each other. I have a very positive outlook, and I really love, the direction Star Wars is going, how it's been going. I've thoroughly enjoyed all of the new content, but I recognize that not everyone does, and I don't want this channel to ever feel like your opinion isn't valid if you happen to disagree with mine. Like, that doesn't make you any less of a fan than me, and vice versa if we happen to have complete polar opposite opinions. Moral of the story, I really loved Andor. If you did too, I'm so happy for you, and if you didn't enjoy it, I am not gonna judge you in any way, shape, or form. Rant over. That's enough venting for one day, guys. Let me know your thoughts on Andor Season 1. If you've made it this far in the video, comment down below who was your favorite new character introduced in this series. I don't even know if I can narrow that down. That's a tough question. Ooh, my brain keeps going back to Andy Serkis, but there were so many. Dedra, Marva, Luthen, so many stellar performances all around. I truly just felt so spoiled every single week watching a new episode of this show. It was so much more brilliant than I could have even asked for. That's gonna be it from me. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you for being patient with me as always when I take these occasional 2-week hiatuses. I do apologize for that, and I know I'm talking about this way after the fact, but thank you guys for watching. Nonetheless, I definitely missed you guys, and this is it. Now that all of our shows are over, we're entering a new Star Wars drought, so I definitely want to make some more cooking with cat videos. I have another fun series in mind that will require your guys' help and suggestions, so I'm excited as much as I'm sad that all of the high period here for us nerds when we had Andor, House of the Dragon, Rings of Power. As upset as I might be that it's over, I'm excited, and hopefully you guys are, for a breath of fresh air and some different content that isn't necessarily reaction and review based. So stay tuned going forward. But yes, I love you guys. Be nice to each other, be kind to each other. I know I'm preaching to the choir here on this channel, and I appreciate you guys and the community that we have here, and none of the stuff that I'm ranting about ever transpires, here on this channel, and I love that you guys do have so much respect for each other, and that's what I do believe the whole fandom can be like that. It would be a better place for sure. Thank you guys so much for watching. May the force be with you guys always, and I will see you guys again very, very soon. Bye, guys.